The 2024 Nobel Prize Judging Committee called the novel, The Boy Comes, Human Acts a powerful poetic prose in the face of history's trauma. The Boy is Coming, Human Acts is a book that Kang Han himself mentioned after his book, The Vegetarian award-winning author. I hope more people read it. The Boy is Coming, Human Acts won the Baylor Prize in 2014. The Italian Malaparte Prize in 2017 and was translated into over 20 countries around the world and eventually won the Nobel Prize in 2024. Through this work, Han deal with especially the process of violence, oppression, wounds, and healing in the process of dictatorship and democratization. The novel also received a lot of attention and praise from readers as a literary tribute to the wounds of Gwangju that awakened them and shared them with them. He captured the sensitive feelings of individuals who had been violently marginalized and alienated in the modern world, and turned them into literary works of art with universal value. That is why The Boy is Coming is widely regarded as an artistic masterpiece that deeply examines the values of human dignity and solidarity beyond mere historical testimonies. And now, the anticipated introduction of The Boy is Coming, Human Acts. Wait, here, like, subscribe and comment. Chapter 1 Little Bird. 5.18 Backdrop 1980 In the Democratic Movement, a mysterious narrator tells the story looking back on Dong Ho as a ninth grader at the time. Soldiers subdue resistance against civic protesters. Dong Ho, a 15-year-old boy, witnessed his friend and senior, Young Dae, being shot down by soldiers. At that moment, Dong Ho desperately wanted to help his friend, but he ran away from the fear that he would die too. After that, Dong Ho suffered from a deep sense of guilt. To ease his guilt, he began to collect the corpses at the Commonwealth Office, where the joint memorials are located. I worked with Eun Suk and the owner there to collect and organize the bodies of the victims. A few days later, when the news comes that soldiers will enter the Office of Commerce, Dong Ho's mother comes for her son. But Dong Ho's inexplicably strong will drives him away from his mother's hand and decides to stay there instead of running away. In the end, Dong Ho was killed when the martial forces took control of the eavesdropping area. Chapter 2 Black Cotton. Chong Tai opens his eyes and finds himself dead. This chapter tells the story from the point of view of the soul of Chong Tai, who was shot dead. Chong Tai watches as his body, along with the other victims, decomposes into the depths of the earth. Sensing his sister's death, he blames himself and the people who killed her. The way he talks to himself about where the blood is coming from, where the pain is coming from, really conveys the grief of the dead man. A few days later, his spirit watches as his body, along with the bodies of other victims, is loaded onto a truck and taken to the mountains. Soldiers tried to destroy the evidence by burning the corpses, and Chong had to watch it all unfold. Even as the corpses rotted together, Chong's spirit constantly tried to communicate with the other spirits, but failed. Finally, with his body burned to the ground, the spirit of Jungai is free to fly up into the sky and try to find Dong Ho. At that moment, he realized that Dong Ho had already passed away. Chapter 3 Seven Cheeks. This chapter is about Eun Suk, a high school girl who worked with Dong Ho at the Office of Investigation, who survived the accident at the hospital. As time went by, Kim Eun Suk gave up her college life of protesting down with the Duwon, and worked as an editor at a small publishing company. She was dragged to the Seodaiman police station for censorship of her manuscripts and received a slap of 7. Eun Suk works at a publishing company. But she survives, and the others live with a deep sense of guilt for their sacrifice. Even though she survived, she blames herself for surviving instead of participating in the democratization movement. The famous line, "I didn't have a funeral after you died, so my life became a funeral," symbolizes the deep scars and pain of Eun Suk. Eun Suk's flashbacks suggest that Dong Ho stayed behind and died fighting martial law. Eun Suk's publisher tried to publish a play about 5.18 but was subject to censorship and sanctions. But in the end, she changed the author's name and published it, and a play based on it was put on stage. As Eun Suk watches the play, she remembers and misses Dong-ho as she feels how unhappy her life was after Dong-ho died. Chapter 4: Iron and Blood. This chapter tells the story from the point of view of a man who was fighting martial law in the burial hall. Kim Jin-soo, who used to work with Dong-ho at the Office of Commerce, faced armed soldiers with the civilians who stayed behind with the strong conviction of conscience. But many were arrested, tortured, starved, and released, only to find their lives changed forever. Kim Jin-soo was also arrested for possession of firearms. He was tortured even more severely, including pen torture and genital torture. He was sentenced to 7 years and was released due to lack of evidence. The narrator constantly blames himself for surviving and suffers from severe trauma. In the end, Kim Jin-soo suffers from severe mental distress and makes a tragic choice to commit suicide. The novel paints a depraved portrayal of the ruthlessness of these countries. But it raises fundamental questions about the cruelty and evil of men. Chapter 5: Night Eye. This is the story of how Seonju retrieved the body. Sunju was still living with the trauma she went through when she worked as a factory worker, joined the union, and was tortured during the pro-democracy movement. After a long time, Seonju was invited to an interview by an author who was writing about the 5.18 democratization movement. Having found it too difficult to bring up the painful memories of the time, Seonju ultimately declined to be interviewed. However, at the end of the story, he volunteers to take care of Seong-wei, who used to be a labor activist with him and has been out of touch for a long time. This shows that Seonju still has the will to fight against injustice and join forces with those who are suffering. Chapter 6: Towards the Flower. The final chapter tells the story from Dong-ho's mother's point of view. That night, the mother went to the police station to pick up her son, but she couldn't save him. She continued to protest with other victims' families to find out the truth. But after her husband passed away due to illness, she stopped protesting and started living with guilt and longing. The chapter doesn't tell the story of a particular event, but of a mother's endless yearning and sorrow for the loss of her child. The solidarity of being with the other grieving families, comforting each other, and the deep pain of loss that will never be erased. The writer prays that among the 518 victims, snow-covered tombs, the bitter and wounded souls, towards the light, towards the flowers, may go on to find peace. Thank you. All right. Subscribe and comment.